Whatever you do, do it well. Do it so well that when people see you do it, they will want to come back and see you do it again, and they will want to bring others and show them how well you do what you do. If you support what we're doing here at the Conservative American Message, you can show us your support by giving us a 5-star rating and by following and subscribing wherever you listen. To stay up to date on everything we're doing, please follow us on social media at the Conservative American Message on Instagram and Facebook. Since the massive red wave laid waste to the Democratic Party in the United States, Donald Trump has been preparing to return to the White House by selecting some of the individuals who will be taking important cabinet positions. Some were expected, others controversial, and there are even some surprises. We'll be going through the whole list of the good and the bad of Trump's picks so far, but just remember that even the most rhino, terrible Republicans are still far better than the communists who will be leaving soon. And also keep in mind that I'm judging some of these people based off of the very little that we know about them, so they might end up better off than I think. Or they could be worse. Who knows? One thing I will admit is that I think I was a little wrong about J.D. Vance in the beginning. I was pretty negative about him, not knowing much. He appeared to be one of those young establishment guys that might ruffle the left's feathers from time to time just to get a soundbite, but ultimately you would think he'd fall in line when Mitch McConnell demanded. I think we can all now recognize that Vance is no rhino. He's a true American and a MAGA Republican through and through. My first concern came about him when I discovered that his wife is an Indian and a Hindu. While still that's not very cool, I do now realize J.D. Vance is not Mike Pence. Trump chose Pence to lock in the evangelical Christian vote. But that was 8 years ago, and today, evangelicals honestly have no other choice. They're all voting for Trump anyway. So rather than choose a Christian rhino, Trump chose a troublemaker like Vance to be his second VP. What I like about him is that when he says common sense policy, he isn't just using that as a Republican buzzword. He means let's actually sit down and figure out what makes the most sense for the American people. So, I'll admit it, I've changed my stance on JD, and I'm a big fan now, with high hopes that he will even carry on the MAGA movement in Trump's retirement from politics. Starting in on these new picks, though, he chose Susie Wiles as his chief of staff. I thought Trump was supposed to be a sexist, but somehow he picked the first woman in American history to fill the role of White House Chief of Staff. She served as a chair of his campaign and has been working in politics since Reagan's first victory in 1980. She's worked with Trump since the beginning of his political career, so I have no doubts that she'll be great. Senator Marco Rubio was announced for Secretary of State. I'm not super stoked about Marco Rubio being a part of this administration. In the 2016 primaries, he was very critical of Trump, and Trump was even more critical of him.
For example, you're the only person on the stage that's ever been fined for hiring people to work on your projects illegally. You hired some workers from Poland.
I'm the only one on the stage that's hired people. You haven't hired anybody.
Throughout the primaries, insults were flying back and forth, but as any slippery politician does, when Rubio saw that the party was going with Trump, he backed out and endorsed him. Some people have even accredited Trump's popularity among Latin American voters to Rubio's support, but I don't know about all that. I just hope he knows that this new job is not just a fancy title. This administration is setting up to be a trailblazer, and the State Department is going to have its work cut out for it. Probably the most controversial appointment he's made so far was Trump's appointment of Matt Gaetz for Attorney General. Matt Gaetz is the House of Representatives Republican that became infamous for heading up the coalition of Republicans that ousted Speaker Kevin McCarthy. He's become known for stirring the pot in Congress, and I'm sure that's exactly what attracted Trump to him for Attorney General. As Trump and many others have been unfairly, illegally, and even unconstitutionally prosecuted by the current Justice Department, Matt Gaetz will not be holding back when it comes to prosecuting the real crimes of the politically elite and corrupt. Of course, in light of being tapped for this new cabinet position, sexual allegations have surfaced alleging that he had sex with some underage prostitutes. Lacking any real evidence, I'm going to be pretty quick to dismiss the accusations as a prime example of the reason that we need Matt Gaetz to head up the Justice Department instead of this current phony administration. I was actually surprised to see RFK getting a legit cabinet position. I knew that he would play a pretty big role in this administration, but that high of a level is a surprise for me. He will be the new Health and Human Services Secretary. Since joining the Trump team, he has started this sub-movement of Make America Healthy Again. And while I agree with him on how Big Pharma and the medical industry is pumping toxic drugs into the entire population and not actually improving our health, and even I agree with him on some of the issues with big food and the ingredients that the FDA is allowing in our food, where I worry is about just how crunchy this guy is and how much he's going to push it. It's one thing to not give a newborn baby 20 vaccines, but it's another to outright ban Roundup on crops. His lack of understanding about how agriculture works and just his views on the environment in general are very concerning, and anyone that does anything related to agriculture should be pretty worried. People like Kennedy don't realize that without pesticides, we would not be able to produce enough crop to feed this country, let alone the whole world. Leaving out the fact that forcing farmers to go organic would destroy small family farms, and it would also drive up the cost of food exponentially. Chemicals like glyphosate or atrazine have only caused health issues when there is a direct exposure to the concentrated chemical, and that can happen with farmers and agricultural workers. But the risks of health issues by the time that a mere 20 ounces of Roundup is applied across an entire acre, the plant then metabolizes that chemical, and the corn is fed to an animal, the trace amounts of chemical that are going to be left in that meat you eat is so small that the research has proven that there are no risks from consuming non-organic food. Even eating things that have corn syrup in them, it is not enough to actually do any harm. We can certainly talk about improving Americans' health, but let's start by focusing on the people who are 100 pounds overweight before we tear down an entire industry because some environmental leftist propaganda. Don't misunderstand me. I'm happy about RFK being a part of this administration. I think he's pretty good overall, but that's the risk you run when you join forces with a Democrat. Oh, I know, he's not as bad as the modern-day Democrats, but he's still a Democrat, and we've got to keep our eyes open. At least we got Chuck Grassley to defend our farmers, right? Yeah, I don't know about that either. When it comes to defending our farmers and their land, another dangerous pick was Doug Burgum. He played his cards right and landed himself a cabinet position of Interior Secretary. If you can remember, Doug Burgum is the North Dakota governor who is buddies with Bill Gates and a big supporter of the carbon capture pipeline. So I'm not a huge fan of the guy, especially him being in charge of land and conservation with the Department of Interior. Tulsi Gabbard has been tapped as the Director of National Intelligence. In that role, her being a Democrat doesn't scare me in the slightest. She has loads of experience in the military that will serve her well in that role. And I think her being involved in the administration at this level is a testament to how non-divisive Trump actually is. He's chosen 2 Democrats to be high-level members of his cabinet. And it really goes to show that beneath all the noise, Americans are really united. Caroline Leavitt has been selected for White House Press Secretary. That is hands down the toughest job in the Trump administration, and Caroline will be the youngest press secretary ever at 27 years old. Other than a few big jobs at different media companies and an unsuccessful run for House in New Hampshire, she's basically just fresh out of college. But nobody understands our current media situation better than Gen Z. The cable news is meaningless to most people today. It's the non-traditional media that rules in politics now. The podcasts and social media have replaced the old ways, and a young press secretary will understand how the fake news operates. Trump also appointed a border czar who will be overseeing the securing of the border and mass deportation of illegal criminals in this country. That job was given to Thomas Homan, who who was previously the director of ICE and a decorated law enforcement officer all his life. He is most famous for his exchange with AOC in a committee hearing.
So you provided the official recommendation to Secretary Nielsen on for the United States to pursue family separation.
I gave Secretary Nielsen numerous recommendations on how to secure the border and save lives.
But it says here that you gave her numerous options, but the recommendation was option 3, family separation.
What I'm saying, this is not the only paper where we've given the Secretary numerous options to secure the border and save lives.
And so the recommendation, of the many that you recommended family separation.
I recommended zero tolerance.
Which includes family separation.
The same as is with every U.S. citizen parent gets arrested with a child.
Zero tolerance was interpreted as the policy that separated children from their
If I get arrested for DUI and I have a young child in the car, I'm going to be separated. When I was a police officer in New York and I arrested a father for domestic violence, I separated that father
Mr.
from his
Holman, with
family.
all due respect, legal asylees are not charged with any crime.
When you're into the country illegally, it's violation 8 United States Code 1325.
Seeking asylum is legal.
If you want to seek asylum, you go through the port of entry, do it the legal way. The Attorney General of the United States has made that clear.
Okay.
But the best appointment of all that Trump has made are that of Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy, who will be heading up the new Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE, if you will. This new commission will be basically pissing off every worthless government employee across the nation as they do a full-scale, intensive audit of how much waste there really is in our federal government. Elon and Vivek are both perfect for the job. They are both successful, self-made billionaires who know firsthand how to cut waste in an organization. Elon fired half of Twitter in one day, and there was no interruption in the platform at all. DOGE is one of the most exciting things about Trump's presidency. It's not about Democrat or Republican anymore, or passing legislation to give the GOP one more point on the scoreboard of legislative decisions that'll just be reversed and go back and forth depending on which party's in power. This movement and this administration are going to fix America in a deep and profound way. And as I said last week, they have been handed a mandate by the American people to do just that. But that's all I have time for. Were you offended by this podcast? Good. Thanks for listening, guys. I really appreciate you all. Have a great week and stay conservative.